things that will help us in order for us to answer problems involving geometry. Kasi usually, geometry involves figures yan eh, mga figures ang kailangan natin dyan. So, and also the different things that we have to know about that given figures. Here we are again, my dear students. Isang magandang araw sa inyong lahat. So today we are going to continue discussing lessons about third grading period in grade 9. So we are now on lesson number 2. So ano ba yung focus ng discussion natin sa lesson number 2? So lesson number 2 natin will focus on parallelogram and its properties. So if we are going to look at the diagram of quadrilaterals, so we will start in the middle. Doon tayo sa pinakagitna, let's start. So yung may kita natin doon sa pinakagitna, yung parallelograms and those under parallel. We'll start with parallelogram first and the different properties that will help us in order for us to answer problems which involves parallelogram, four-sided polygon, tinatawag nating parallelogram. So we know already the definition of parallelogram. Diba? So we have defined that already on our first lesson, wherein meron siyang two pairs of opposite sides which are parallel to each other. Two pairs of opposite sides which are parallel. Two pairs of parallel opposite sides which are congruent. So specifically yung definition natin ng parallelogram. So in geometry, so when you are studying geometry, hindi mawawala doon na kailangan natin alamin yung different things that will help us in order for us to answer problems involving geometry. Kasi usually, geometry involves figures yan eh, mga figures ang kailangan natin dyan. So, and also the different things that we have to know about that given figures. So, other things that will help us in order for us to answer those things that we need to know about the different figures in geometry. So, kailangan natin also malaman yung iba pang bagay. Just like these two things. So, unahin natin, of course, in discussing about geometry, hindi mawawala doon, may encounter natin, tinatawag nating postulates. So, you have already, if I'm not mistaken, you have already encountered postulates, the discussion or a glimpse of it during your grade 8. So, postulates, when we say postulates, these are statements that can be accepted even without proof. So right away, these statements pwede natin magamit in order for us to prove something with a specific figure. So pwede natin magamit yan even if we are not going to prove it. So kasi it's just like right away we can say that it's true. But when we say postulates, so aside from postulates, we need also to know theorems. So meron din tayo tinatawag na theorems. Ano ba yung theorems naman? Theorems, these are statements that needs to be proven before it gets accepted. So the usual is that when you are going to make use of a theorem in order for you to solve a specific problem in geometry, you have to prove first that given theorem. So, para malaman mo, para magamit mo siya in order for you to solve that specific problem in geometry. Just like yung grade 8 kayo, if I'm not mistaken, you have discussed their hinge theorem. Tinatawag natin na hingi theorem, di ba? So, yung hinge theorem, so bago gamitin yon, so kailangan mo nang i-prove. So once it has been proven, then you can now make use of that specific theorem. So, yun yung other things that will help us in discussing or in answering problems involving geometry. So, postulates and theorems will help us to do that. Now, since we are focusing this time on parallelogram and its properties, so ano-ano ba yung conditions? Nandito tayo ng conditions which guarantee that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So may mga conditions daw na masasabi natin that will assure us that a given quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So these conditions will hide it through an acronym. So acronym natin for these conditions ay tatawagin natin AQUA. What comes to your mind when what comes first to your mind kapag nabanggit yung word na aqua? Water, di ba? We are pertaining to water. Water is one of the basic needs ng tao. Lalo na ngayon, we are in the middle of the pandemic. Diba? Mas lalo ngayon, mas lalong tumataas na naman yung case ng COVID-19. So, water is very important. Kasi sabi nga, you have to keep your body hydrated. So, inom ng tubig. So, lalo na ngayon, sumabay pa na papasok tayo sa summer. Mainit na yung panahon. So, mas lalong kailangan natin yung tubig. So, wag natin hayaan na magkulang tayo sa tubig. Because water is very important sa katawan natin. So, wag natin hayaan na matuyuan tayo. So, very important na lagi tayong hydrated. So, di ba masabi, we have to drink 8 to 10 bottles of water every day. So, kung kaya mo mas marami pa doon, why not? Di ba? So, as long as you keep your body hydrated. So, huwag hayaan na mag-dehydrate tayo. So, yun yung conditions natin, yun yung acronym natin to sa conditions which guarantee that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So, ano-ano ba yung mga yun? Ano-ano ba yung mga conditions which guarantee that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram? So, una, sabi dito, a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. So, specifically, that first statement is we are pertaining to the definition of a parallelogram. A parallelogram has two pairs of opposite sides which are parallel and congruent. Diba? So that's the first one. So if that is the case, then we can guarantee that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Second, a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. Both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. So, magka-opposite na angles ng parallelogram, they are congruent. So that means we are also pertaining to a parallelogram. Third, a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if both pairs of consecutive angles are supplementary. So when we say supplementary, so the sum of the angles is equal to 180 degrees. Dalawang magkasunod na angles daw. So, pag kinuha natin sum of the two consecutive angles, the sum is equal to 180. So that means they are supplementary. Fourth, number 4, a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if the diagonals bisect each other. If the diagonals bisect each other. Pag sinabi natin bisect, it divides it into equal measures. So yung diagonals na yun, since nag-intersect sila, nag-draw tayo ng diagonal ng parallelogram, so yung intersection na doon sa gitna, hinati nun yung diagonal na yun into two equal measures. Yung isang diagonal, kapag binisect ng other diagonal, hinati niya yun into two equal measures. Ganun din yung isang diagonal. So, yun yung fourth. Next, number 5, a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if each diagonal divides a parallelogram into two congruent triangles. Again, a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if each diagonal divides a parallelogram into two congruent triangles. So dapat, when you draw a diagonal in a given parallelogram, hinahati niya dapat yun into two congruent triangles. So, in that way, we can guarantee that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. And number 6, sabi dito, a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if one pair of opposite sides are congruent and parallel. One pair of opposite sides are congruent and parallel. It's just like we are defining parang a parallelogram. Diba? So meron siyang two pairs of opposite sides which are congruent in measure and parallel. So meron siyang one pair of opposite sides which are congruent and parallel. So, parang meron dalawang ganun. So ayun yung different conditions that will guarantee us that the given quadrilateral is a parallel. Now, in order for us to solve a problem which involves parallelogram as a figure, aside from those conditions that we have mentioned, so another thing is we have to know the different properties that will help us to do that. So there are different properties of parallelogram that will help us in order for us to solve problems which involves the figure parallelogram. So ano-ano yung mga yon? So these properties still will hide it through an acronym. So yung acronym na gagamit natin, tinatawag natin na iniinda. So bakit nga ba iniinda? Ito lang paliwanag ko dyan. Why is it always that every time we hear something bad na sinasabi about us, the tendency is iniinda natin siya. We get hurt by it. Even though we know that it's not true, the tendency is that we get hurt. We got hurt by it. Why? What's the reason? It is because we do have feelings. Meron tayong pakiramdam. Di naman tayo bato eh. So, ito lang ano natin. So, maybe those persons who are saying bad about you, who keep saying bad about you, maybe they do have problems in real life na they do not have an outlet na para maihingan nila yung problema nila. So, ang ginagawa nila ganun. So, it's just a matter of understanding them. Let's understand them. Maybe nagdadaanan silang hindi maganda sa buhay nila. So, they are doing that. For others, maybe they are just naiinggit lang sa'yo. Siguro, yun, insecure. Kasi insecurities, kailangan kasi, para matanggal mo insecurities sa sarili mo, kailangan you have to accept who you are. So, tanggapin mo lang kung sino ka. Yung mga hindi mo gusto sa sarili mo, you just have to accept it. So, may time that it will be improved, but as long as you know yourself, you accept yourself, I don't think yung mga taong may sinasabing bad about you, even if it's not true, ay magagawa pang magganon kung hindi mo sila mabasa. It's just a matter of ignoring them. So, ignoring and understanding them also. Katulad sinabi natin kanina, maybe they do have problems in their own life that they do not have an outlet na mailabas yung sama ng loob nila, yung mga problema meron sila. So, the tendency is that ganun na lang yung ginagawa nila. So, just understand them and let's not fight them. So, ano bang, mas lalo na siguro magkakagulo if you're going to do that. So, just ignore them. Pasasaan ba, matitigil din yan. Magsasawa din yan, di ba? So, ganun lang. It's just a matter of accepting who you are. Once you know who you are, accept who you are, so wala sigurong makakatibag sa'yo. Kahit sino pa man yan. So as long as the person close to you ay kilala ka, and I don't think masisira ka nila. So nang ganun kadali. So just believe in yourself. So if you believe in yourself that you can do it, that certain thing, and magagawa yun. So just have to believe in yourself. So kung naniniwala ka na lahat naman nagsasabi sa'yo ng masama ay matatauhan din in the end, then mangyayari yun. You just have to believe in it. So that's the message of the properties na tinago natin in an acronym na tinatawag nating iniinda. So ano ba yung iniinda? Nahin natin, first property, IN. IN stands for, in a parallelogram, any two opposite sides are congruent. Again, in a parallelogram, any two opposite sides are congruent. Pinensyon na rin natin kanina yun, di ba? Ang parallelogram ay meron siyang two sides which are parallel to each other. And those two sides which are parallel to each other, they are congruent in measure. Meron siyang dalawang ganon. So, again, the first property is that in a parallelogram, any two opposite sides are congruent. Next, I. I stands for, in a parallelogram, any two opposite angles are congruent. Parang minention na rin natin siya through the conditions kanina. So, if you do have a given parallelogram, yung angle opposite to it, they are equal in measure. So they are congruent in measure. So, kasi according to the property, in a parallelogram, any two opposite angles are congruent. So when you encounter problems about parallelogram na meron kang measurement about the angles of it, and you are asked to find the measure of that angles, so all you have to do is to apply the property about the property mentioning about angles of a parallelogram. Third, sabi dito, in a parallelogram, any two consecutive angles are supplementary. Again, in a parallelogram, any two consecutive angles are supplementary. Dalawang magkasunod na angles daw in a parallelogram, they are, when we add them, they are equal to 180 degrees. That's what we mean by supplementary. Next, D. Sabi dito, diagonals of a parallelogram bisect each other. So, mention na rin natin kanina yan through the conditions that diagonals of a parallelogram bisect each other. So, if draw ka na isang diagonal ng parallelogram at draw ka na isa, so yung intersection nila, hinati niya yung bawat diagonals na yon into equal measures. So, isang diagonal, kapag intersection ng isang diagonal, hinati yung diagonal into two equal measures. Same way with the other diagonal. Next, A. The last property, A stands for a diagonal of a parallelogram divides the parallelogram into two congruent triangles. So, yung bawat diagonal, dinidivide yung parallelogram into two congruent triangles. Sinabi congruent triangles, equal yung measure of its, congruent yung measure of its sides and angles. So, sides and angles equal, congruent in measure. So, these are the properties that will help us in order for us to answer problems which involves parallelogram. Now, let's apply these properties through examples. So, let's have here example number 1. So, in example number 1, we are here going to find the value of x and y. So, we do have here given figure. You know that the given figure is a parallelogram with a given measurement for its sides. So analyzing the given figure and the measurements given also on the sides of it. So what we are asked to do is to find for the value of x and y that will satisfy that given parallelogram. So paano ba natin yung gagawin? So let's have here the solution to it. So yun na, pinaliit lang natin. So going back to the properties about parallelograms, which property there is mentioning about the size of a parallelogram? So particularly, we are mentioning it on the first property. Sabi doon, in a parallelogram, any two opposite sides are congruent. So this side together with this side, they are opposite sides. So that means according to the property, they are congruent. Also, this side is opposite to this side. So again, according to the property, any two opposite sides in a parallelogram are congruent. So it so happened that yung magkatapat involves the variable x and the other one involves the variable y. So by knowing using that property, we can solve for the value of x and y. Unahin natin yung x and y. Again, sabi doon, in a parallelogram, any two opposite sides are congruent. So pag sinabi natin congruent, they are equal in measure. So sa madaling salita, if we are going to solve for x, we're going to solve for x with the use of the first property in parallelogram, we can come up with the equation 2x plus 4 is equal to x plus 9. Because according to the property, in a parallelogram, any two opposite sides are congruent. So we can solve for x now by isolating this equation. So we have to move x to the left side. That's just by simply using the subtraction property and move 4 to the right side. Ganun din, subtraction property of equality. So magiging ganito. Magiging 2x minus x kasi binove natin yung x to the left side. When we move 4 to the right side, magiging pares minus x and minus 4. Then simply simplify it. As 2x minus x, come up with x, and 9 minus 4 is equal to 5. So we come up with the value of x, which is equal to 5. Now let's prove it. It's really true. Now, according to the property, any two opposite sides are congruent. If x is equal to 5, x plus 5 that would be equal to, or 5 plus 9 rather, is equal to 14. Dito, 2 times 5, that would be 10 plus 4 is equal to 14 also. So that means the value of x is equal to 5. So we have already solved the value of x. Now let's solve for the value of y. So yung relationship ng dalawang sides na to, measurement na to is that they are also opposite sides of a parallelogram. And according to the first property, again, any two opposite sides are congruent. That means to solve for y, we have to also equate the two. So we do have 2y minus 6 is equal to y plus 2. Then move yung y to the left side, 6 naman to the right side. Applying the property. Then we come up with 2y minus y by moving y to the left, magiging minus y. By moving negative 6 to the right, magiging plus 6. So we'll come up with 2y minus y is equal to y, then 2 plus 6 is equal to 8. So therefore, y is equal to 8. And let's find out kung tama. 8 plus 2, that would be 10. 2 times 8, that would be 16. Minus 6, that would also be 10. So therefore, the value of y is equal to 8. So basically, to solve this problem, which involves the figure parallelogram, we made use of one property of a parallelogram stated that in a parallelogram, any two opposite sides are congruent. Did you get example number 1? So if not yet, let's try another example. Let's have example number 2. So this time we're going to find w, x, and y. So paano yun? So we do have here a given parallelogram also. With a given measurement this time for the angles of it. So, paano natin siya solve? So the solution is here. So going back to the properties of a parallelogram, which property there is mentioning about the angles of a parallelogram? So may dalawang properties doon na mini-mention angles of a parallelogram. Una, sabi doon, in a parallelogram, any two opposite angles are congruent. Any two opposite angles are congruent. Pangalawa, sinasabi, in a parallelogram, any two consecutive angles are supplementary. So analyzing the given here, we do have measures of angle here na involving same variable. So we do have here this angle together with this angle. When you are going to look at its measurement, they both use the same variable x. And according to one property of a parallelogram na sinasabi, in a parallelogram, any two opposite angles are congruent. Just like what we did on the first example. So the first thing we're going to do is to solve for x first, because in that way we can right away apply property number 2 on parallelogram, that in a parallelogram, any two opposite angles are congruent. So we can equate the two, we come up with 7x minus 7 is equal to 6x plus 4. So when we do the equation, arrange na agad natin siya much better if we're going to write the higher numerical coefficient of the variable on the left side, yung mas mababa in nasa right side. Para pag in-arrange natin siya in combining similar terms, so mas mataas pa rin yung much better if we're going to do it like that. So, even though nandito 6x, muna natin 7x kasi mas mataas siya than 6x. So, with that property, number 2, we can now solve for the value of x by isolating this equation. Move 6x to the left, then negative 7 to the right. Kakaroon tayo ng 7x minus 6x is equal to 4 plus 7. Then 7x minus 6x is equal to x, then 4 plus 7 is equal to 11. That's why we come up with the value of x, which is equal to 11. Now, pwede mo na ngayong gamitin yung 11 to find out the measure of these two angles. So, x ay 11, so 7 times 11, 77 minus 7, that would be 70 degrees. So that means this angle measures 70 degrees. So kung 70 degrees to, yung katapat ng angle is also 70 degrees. Diba? Masunod tayo. Now, let's solve for y. So, paano ba natin solve for y? So, we do have two options in solving for y. Since we know that this angle is equal to 70, so, according to the property, in a parallelogram, any two consecutive angles are supplementary. Ibig sabihin na, pag in-add yung dalawang angles na yon, that will be equal to 180 degrees. Kung 70 na to, ang kasunod niya, yung angle na to, magkatabi sila. Kasunod sila. So, ibig sabihin, kung 70 to, ang total dapat na ay 180. So, ilan to? That would be 110 degrees. So, it will be equal to 110 degrees. So, pwede natin gamitin yun. So, since equal yan to 110 degrees, na alam natin equal to 110 degrees, pwede natin equate yung 2y plus 4 is equal to 110 degrees. So, magiging ganito. Or, any two, kasi any two consecutive angles are supplementary. So, pag in-add yung dalawang to, it will be equal to 180 degrees. So, that would be 2y plus 4 plus 70, because we know that x is 11, and we know that when we substitute it, the answer is equal to 70. So, we come up, it's equal to 180 with the use of that third property in parallelogram. So, isolating it by adding first 4 plus 70, we come up with 74 by then moving 74 to the left side minus 74. Then 2y is equal to 180 minus 74, which is equal to 106. Then divide both sides of the equation by 2 to find for the value of y. We come up with the value of y, which is equal to 50, equal to 53. So the value of y is equal to 53. Okay? So, ang ginamit natin, yung third property natin in third property in a parallelogram, which states that in a parallelogram, any two consecutive angles are supplementary. Next, isa na natitira. We are now going to solve for W. So for W, since we know na kung 53 yung Y, alam na din natin na ito ay 110. Tama, di ba? Magiging 110 dapat. 2 times 53 is 106 plus 4, that would be 110. Kung 110 yun, dapat 110 din to. Because they are opposite angles of a parallelogram. So, according to the property, any two in a parallelogram, any two opposite angles are congruent. So, they are equal. So, kung alam mo 110 na to, so you can equate it to this to solve for W. So, we come up with 3W minus 4 is equal to 110. Then, move yung negative 4 to the right side of the equation. Nagkakaroon tayo ng 3W is equal to 110 plus 4. Then 110 plus 4 is 114. Then to solve for W, we have to divide both sides of the equation by 3 so that we'll come up with the value of W, which is equal to 38. Kung ang W by 38, it will be equal to 110. So 3 times 38, that would be 106. Hindi, 120. 114. 3 times 38 is equal to 114 minus 4, that would be equal to 110. So in that way, na-solve natin what is asked in the problem about parallelogram, basically by using two properties. Property number 2, which states that in a parallelogram, any two opposite angles are congruent. Then the third property na in a parallelogram, any two consecutive angles are supplementary. So that's how we solve example number 2. It's solving for W, X, and Y. It's not necessarily mean na kung naunang minention yung you are going to solve for W, yun din agad yung unang tutunin. It's just a matter of analyzing first the given figure as well as those given in that figure para malaman natin which property yung angkop para ma-solve yung problem natin. So ano ba yung unang kaagad-agad na pwede nating ma-solve? So i-analyze mo muna yun. So in here, right away, we can solve for X because opposite angles, aside from they are congruent, they are also using the same variable. So that's why we can right away solve for X. But unlike yung the other one, the other is W, the other is Y, na magka-opposite. So again, that's how we solve example. Any questions? If none, let's proceed to the next. Let's solve example number 3. For example number 3, we are here going to find M and N. So this is the given figure. Sa given figure natin, ang involved naman ay diagonals. Diagonals of a parallelogram. So may given measurement tayo for its diagonal. So, balik tayo sa property. So, kapag ganyan given natin, alam mo parallelogram siya, so pumunta ka doon sa mga properties about parallelograms na involve yung diagonal of a parallelogram. So to solve for it, sabi doon, diagonals of a parallelogram bisect each other. Diagonals of a parallelogram bisect each other. Ibig sabihin, example, itong diagonal na to, nahati siya into equal measures ng diagonal na to. On the other hand, itong diagonal naman na to, hinati rin siya nung isang diagonal into equal measures. So analyzing the given natin figure and also those given measurement in that figure involving diagonals. So malalaman agad natin, well, analyzing it, kahit anong variable yung kunin natin, pwede na agad natin makuha yun. So, kasi kung binisect, sinabi natin kasi bisect each other, pag sinabi bisect each other, it divides it into equal measure. So, itong diagonal na to, hinati siya ng diagonal na to into equal measures. Sa madaling salita, equal silang dalawa. So, by knowing that, masosolve natin yung value of m. So, to solve for m, just simply equate the 2. So, we come up with 4m minus 2 is equal to 3m plus 4. Isolating that given equation, kakaroon tayo ng 4m minus 3m is equal to 4 plus 2. Then 4m minus 3m, that would be equal to m, which is equal to 6. So the value of m is 6. Tingnan natin kung tama. So 3 times 6 is equal to 18 plus 4 equal to 22. 4 times 6, that would be equal to 24 minus 2, which is equal to 22. So they are equal or congruent in measure. How about the value of n? Given na to eh. Alam mo that this is half of this diagonal. So, since bisect each other, so, kung ano yung measure nito, yun din yung measure nung other half of it. So, we can equate also the 2 to solve for n. So, we come up with 3n minus 3 is equal to 13. So, ganun din yung ginawa natin just like what we did on finding n. Ang kaibahan nga lang is that we already know the measure of this. Ibig sabihin, ganun din dapat maging measure niya. So, ano yung value ng n para maging ganun din yung measure of that half of the other diagonal. So, move lang yung negative 3 to the right side. Magkakaroon tayo ng 3n is equal to 13 plus 3. Then, magkakaroon tayo ng n is equal to 16 over 3. Because 13 plus 3 is 16. And divide both sides by 3. So, 16 is not divisible by 3. So, it will stay as it is. So, n is equal to 16 over 3. It's about nasa 16 or 5 point something. Nasa 5 point something siya. 5.33. 333. So, 5.33. Pag ni-rounded off natin. Nasa ganun yung measure of the value or the value of n. So, 16 over 3. Pag natin 16 over 3, pag pinrove natin siya, 3 times 16 over 3, cancel yung 3, try 16. 16 minus 3 is equal to 13. So therefore, n is equal to 16 over 3. So, in this example, in order for us to solve it, so ang kinailangan lang natin is to apply a property, property number 4 in parallelogram, which states that diagonals of a parallelogram bisect each other. So, any questions? Did you get examples 1, 2, and 3? So, hopefully, nakuha yung mga examples natin dyan na ginamit natin yung figure na parallelogram and the different properties that will help us in order for us to solve parallelogram, in order for us to solve problems which involves parallelogram. If there are no more questions, that would be all for today. Goodbye, class!